The legacy of Sheikh Hasina, I think this Awami League cannot function in Bangladesh. I think their era is totally over.
July uprising was co-opted by extremists or some Islamic elements. So how do you respond to these claims, and what was the actual ideological composition of this uprising?
July Revolution, it was not kind of Islamist sort of goal.
How do you assess the role, mindset, and impact of this generation, particularly Gen Z and Gen X, in shaping such movement in whole South Asia?
In case of this Gen Z, which are the main driving force behind this revolution, is that they managed to transform the humiliation into some kind of identity. When they were told Rajakars, we can see the similar kind of slogans, right? Tumi ke, ami ke, Rajakar, Rajakar. Right?
What about the possibility of Sheikh Hasina returning to Bangladesh?
I think there are three things here. One is her physical return. Number two is her return to politics. And number three is her return to the power.
Do you see this as a temporary wave of vigilant justice or the part of a permanent, non-partisan civic force?
And also the plundering the resources from the country, $234 billion from this poor nation. It's not a joke. India will never forget the kind of things that we have done for India, right? So that sort of thing. And another minister, he branded the whole relationship as husband and wife.
Assalamu alaikum, dear audience, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks everyone for joining the July special podcast of Doctor Perspective. Today we are going to cover a very important topic about July, and that is ideology, power, and the post-July state. For having a discussion about this very topic, we have a special guest with us, Dr. Saidul Islam, Associate Professor, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. We are really grateful to have our guest with us in our studio today. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
We are very grateful to. Thank you. Welcome. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, everything is fine so far.
Today we are going to have a discussion about July, especially ideology, power, and the post-July state.
Right.
The first thing that I'd like to know from you, that a recurring claim on behalf of the former autocratic regime and some so-called analysts is that July uprising was co-opted by extremists or some Islamic elements. So how do you respond to these claims, and what was the actual ideological composition of this uprising? What do you think about this?
Thank you very much. This is a very good question. I think this is some sort of blaming the victim and sanctifying the oppressor.
All right.
Because July Revolution, if you look at the origin as well as the composition, I think this kind of claim is absolutely flawed.
All right.
Primarily, July Revolution started with the quota reform movement. That was a kind of organic movement, right?
Okay.
So it was not kind of Islamist sort of goal that the movement actually had. Later on,
it has no connection with Islam or some other, I think, or maybe it is not religious issue.
It's not a religious issue at all. It is a kind of fairness issue, right?
Right.
The quota reform movement, right? So later on, it becomes a kind of, sort of national movement for fairness, for justice, for, democracy, rule of law. And even, it was a movement against the foreign interference.
Right.
So the broad-based movement, you can see the composition. There are people from every single social strata. They participated in this movement. You see students from private universities, public universities. You see men, women, children.
Even national colleges.
Exactly, yes. So I think it was, it can never be a kind of Islamic sort of capture of the whole
or any
movement.
kind of extremist connections.
No, but by saying that, there are also, the people with, the people from madrasa, for example. Yes, but, we cannot just brand it as a kind of Islamist sort of takeover. Because, for example, if there is a national election and there are different people, participating in the whole election, so we cannot tell the national election as a, by equating with one single group, right?
Right.
So I think this is not a kind of, I think the former regime, they want to evade the responsibility, the horrific kind of crimes they have done. So they want to conflate it or, evade this responsibility and brand it as a kind of, counter-terrorism sort of initiative that they have.
And extremism or something like that.
Exactly, yes.
There are very common slogans so far that we have seen, that extremist, Islamist,
and this is
Jongi, and some other terms.
Exactly, this is they have been doing for the last 17 years, right? And this is exactly this is the kind of expected sort of rhetoric that they have been using and they are using now.
Right. The next thing that I'd like to know from you that Bangladesh has a rich legacy of mass movement. If I want to start with, I think, the language movement of 1952, then the Liberation War of 1971, and then 1990 anti-autocracy uprising.
Right.
Now, what I want to know from you that what makes the July Revolution different than all these movements in terms of mobilization tactics and ultimate objectives?
Right. I think the 1952 movement was largely within the cultural circle.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has a kind of particular domain.
Mm-hmm.
71 was definitely, it was a struggle for independence, statehood, and it was a kind of arms struggle at the same time. And we also see the involvement of India, in between, and eventually Bangladesh got independence from Pakistan.
Right.
So that has a totally different kinds of dimension. And all these are part of, our own history and legacy. But July Revolution is totally different.
Okay.
First of all, it was driven by the student. It was a movement for, initially with the quota reform movement, but later on it becomes a kind of broader national movement for fairness, justice, rule of law, democratic principles and all kinds of things. So, and it didn't have any, centralized sort of political figure.
Right.
Traditionally, most of the movements are run by the political leader, but this
Yes.
movement is not. It's totally driven by other people, means the students, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was joined
not
by
only
other
students,
people.
I think. So far, what we have experienced, that I think the mass people from
Mass
different
people, right.
classes.
Initially, it was
Right.
initiated by the students, but later on, they were joined by the mass people across the nation. And also, what is amazing about this movement is that there was this wonderful blending between the network,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, basically, what you call the screen as well as the street.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a wonderful combination, and
Mhm.
they are very quick to respond with so much of creativity and so
Mhm.
on. So I think this is very amazing to look at how the people from every single social strata, they came and joined this movement, and actually they have a very deep-seated kind of grievance and also anger against the former rule, which I call the kleptocratic fascism,
Mhm.
right? So I think in every sense, I think July Revolution is kind of different. And that because of that, we managed to get rid of the ferocious, 17 years of kleptocratic fascist
Right.
rule.
Thank you. But one more thing that I think that has similarity, that is Cockroach Janata Party in India,
Right.
So we have observed that the movement associated with this party in India is continuing till today. Now, and what we have seen so far, that a huge number of young individuals from different classes of people, they appeared and they tried to mobilize the movement as much as possible. Because of perceived injustice, often taking the streets and positioning themselves at the forefront of such activities. Now, how do you assess the role, mindset, and impact of this generation, particularly Gen Z and Gen X, in shaping such movement in whole South Asia?
It's a very good question. I think the July Revolution is not unique in Bangladesh. You can see the wave of the Gen Z revolution across
Right.
South Asia. Even to your surprise, we had a conference.
But the title of, I think the title of the revolution is different in different parts
Different
of
parts.
this
Yes.
area.
We call it July Revolution.
Right.
I think they have Cockroach Revolution or Aragalaya
Right.
in Sri Lanka, for example. So, for example, at NTU we had a conference on Asian disruptions.
Right.
So I found that we had some guests from even other Southeast Asian countries and
Right.
Asia Pacific, and they told me that even their own people are also kind of influenced by the July Revolution in Bangladesh.
Right.
So you can see the wave of movement across not only South Asia but Southeast Asia, even beyond.
Mhm.
So there is a huge kind of interest to understand the composition of this movement, what actually led this movement, and also the chemistry of this new kind of generation. I think what I understood, by the way, I'm writing, a book which is going to be published by Oxford University Press,
All right.
The Anatomy of Revolt, July
Okay.
Revolution, and the Struggle for Democracy in Bangladesh. So, which is now currently in production, and it will be out in November.
We'll be happy to
sometimes.
have it, inshallah.
Thank you. So I actually scan not only the revolution in Bangladesh, but also across the world,
Okay.
especially in South Asia. So what is amazing in case of this Gen Z, which are the main driving force behind this revolution, is that they managed to transform the humiliation into some kind of identity. Cockroach, for example,
Right.
they were branded as cockroach. So this is the kind of humiliation.
Mhm.
And now they name their politics as a kind of
As cockroach.
as cockroach, right? And in case of Bangladesh also, we can see the similar kind of thing. When they were told Rajakars, we can see the similar kind of slogans, right? Tumi ke, ami ke, Rajakar, Rajakar, right? Yeah. So
It becomes a brand of this movement.
exactly, and this is kind of common trajectory almost everywhere in the
Right.
world today, especially in South Asia. So this is number one. Secondly, they have a tremendous amount of organizing capacity
Right.
through different kinds of networks. I mean, this tech-savvy nation, generation. I mean, it's amazing that they do not have any centralized leader. I mean, and you cannot understand from where all these things are coming. And overnight, they managed to.
I think most of the people, underestimate Gen Z all the
Yeah,
time.
exactly.
What they are, they don't have any connection with the nature. They don't have any connection with the real life.
Exactly.
They're just going through the social media and online world, but they have no connection with the real world. That was
Exactly,
the, I think, ultimate claim about Gen Z.
Yeah. And also you can see their creativity, right?
Right.
I mean, look at the kind of slogans they're making, the kind of poetry they're, reciting, and the kind of wall, writing, graffiti, all kinds of things. I mean, you can see the creativity and also the organizing capacity, it's absolutely amazing. And also they are very, very sensitive to some kind of, hypocrisy, right?
And identification. I think if anybody, question them about their identity, they don't take it positively at all.
Exactly. So I think India is the largest democracy in the whole
Right.
world, and they thought that it's absolutely unshaken, but now I think it is proven false. So
Right.
Gen Zs are a kind of driving force everywhere in the world, especially in South Asia, and I think so. It actually changed the entire landscape of South Asian politics,
Right.
because you cannot ignore their political capacity, right? Because that can change a lot of things. In case
Right.
of Bangladesh, the entire regime got changed, right? You can see Gen Z came to power in Nepal, right?
Right.
Yeah, Aragalaya movement in Sri
Sri
Lanka,
Lanka.
you also see the regime change, right? So that's why I think even it has a great lesson for Bangladesh as well. If Bangladesh fails to, incorporate the Gen Z sentiment, the spirit of July Revolution, then obviously the regime has to pay the price.
Right.
This is my conclusion, basically.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. There have been allegations regarding the current BNP's government, because as we were talking about Bangladesh and July movement, even suggesting that certain ministers have indicated the party's support for the implementation of the July Charter is primarily driven just by the urgency of holding elections, and rather than a genuine commitment to its principles. Now, in your view, how credible are these claims of political opportunism or conspiracy? And additionally, what do you foresee as the future of the July Charter in this context?
Very good question. I think before the election, we can see the debate whether we need to have reform. After the election or before the election, I think PNP has a position that they want to do the reform after the election. Election happened. We also have referendum. More than 70%, I think around 70% people, they actually voted for the July Charter. And after coming to power, we can see totally some kind of U-turn of the government, which is very, very unfortunate. I think the message is not good for the younger generation. So I think BNP should be very careful in that. They should take lessons from the last regime. I have the history of the last 3,000 years in Bengal, right? And perhaps Hasina was the most powerful ever in the history of Bangladesh.
All right.
But you can see because of the movement, that powerful regime, managed to flee from the nation, from the country. So I think it has a great lesson for BNP as well. I
Right.
think, of course, within BNP there are certain dynamics. I think one of the dynamics is that, if they, immediately respond to July Charter or some of the recommendation, given by the, interim government, they feel that they're basically it will help eventually the opposition party rather than BNP itself, because they have some kind of course, BNP, the quarter of the BNP had a very strong role in July Revolution, but also there are some people who actually managed to have some kind of co-option with the last regime,
Right.
which is kind of clear. So I think there was some kind of debate within the BNP itself. I think it is time for BNP to take a very kind of pro-July role to make sure that July Charter is now, taken into action. Like otherwise, I don't see any good future for BNP. I think
Right.
it will be, and they're basically, kind of playing with fire. This is my
Right.
this is my sense because
I think
without
Genji is, I think in this case, Genji will take a kind of binary decision. They will accept BNP maybe if they implement July Charter.
Mhm.
If they, I think, implement this, then they will accept it.
Of course,
And they will,
yeah.
I think, support BNP. And if it
Yeah.
is not,
Yeah,
I think there will nothing, no answer between 1 and 0.
exactly. But it is not just the first 5-6 months. I think so. It's still too early to talk about the performance of the government. I think they have many other priorities. Perhaps they are focusing on those sort of priorities. But eventually, they need to, I think, implement the July Charter.
Yep.
Otherwise, I think the baggage that BNP will be creating is totally irreparable.
Right. Thank you. Next, I'd like to know from you that we are seeing a new phenomenon of civic rage where ordinary citizens and Gen Z youth are bypassing traditional political structures to take to the streets against everyday injustices. Now, do you see this as a temporary wave of vigilant justice or the birth of a permanent, non-partisan civic force?
I think why these things are happening is largely because of the trust deficit, right? Because, the police are supposed to help them, but they know that the police is not going to help them. They are going to be harmed by the police.
Right.
When they go to the legal system, for example, they when they understand that the legal system is not going to protect them. When they go to the local elite, they know that local elites are busy with their own interest at the cost of the long-term sustainability and the interest of the general masses. So when people have this kind of sentiment, this is a kind of trust deficit, and that's the time when people take law in their own hand, right?
Okay.
So I think July Revolution has a very strong sort of root to that kind of situation. And this is a kind of situation which is also, in sociological terms, this is called the risk society,
Okay.
in which people lose their trust on the institutions, the institutions that are supposed to protect them. But instead of protecting them, these institutions are actually exploiting them.
Right.
So this is the time, when people become, they take the law in their own hand. And we see July Revolution happen for 36 days, right? And that's the time of this kind of situation. But for the long term, this is not good for democracy. I think there is a need to have, of course, the institution, they are mandated by the Constitution to play their own rules. I think the Gen Z, even though they can organize themselves, which is part of their, constitutional right.
Right.
But taking the law in their own hand is not good for the long term, sustainability of the country. So I think there is a need to make a balance between these two,
Right.
for the long term. I think the Gen Z they can actually make a kind of situation in which the institution can take the constitutionally, mandated role, basically to deliver to the citizens, so that the peaceful situation can emerge.
Thank you. The next thing that I'd like to know from you that the July Revolution was notably driven by Gen Z, who utilized decentralized leadership, digital activism, and horizontal organizing. Now, how does this generation's political consciousness clash with the more traditional, top-down political mindset of Gen Z and older political elites?
That's a very good question. I think the entire political landscape actually changed because of this Gen Z kind of revolution. The traditional political structure, you can see the top-down sort of approach,
Right.
the command and control sort of approach. You have the top figure, who is largely coming from the family background or the blood kind of relationship, or some kind of historical sort of legacy. And then you have the standing committee, from standing committee to different other local organization, and then they go to the street. This is how the whole political structure and the order actually
Works.
transfuse from the top to the bottom, right? But that is kind of top down. But in case of Gen Z, it's totally horizontal. Even they don't have any central leader, right?
Right.
So how decisions are made is very, very quick. In case of the traditional political system, you can see sometimes that the decisions are taken it takes very long time. But in case of Gen Z's kind of situation, they are very quick to respond. They can do research very quickly, right? And they are very, very creative to respond to some of the issues that they are dealing with. So definitely, I think this is a kind of new sort of, what we call the network sort of citizenship that is emerging in the political landscape.
All right.
I think the party in power, I should tell that BNP should understand this kind of dynamics, and these dynamics cannot be ignored,
Yes.
right? If they ignore, then they will be eventually fail. So the political party, my prediction is that, and this is my research based on my book, that the people, the political parties that embrace this Gen Z kind of sentiment and basically, negotiate between the traditional politics plus the new kind of phenomenon. They're the one who can eventually survive in the political landscape.
Yes.
If they retain their traditional kind of political structure, the command and control sort of structure, I think that will not work for the long period of time.
Right. Thank you. So now, what about the possibility of Sheikh Hasina returning to Bangladesh? From a structural, legal, and political standpoint, how realistic is her return?
Very good question. I think there are three things here. One is her physical return. Number two is her return to politics. And number three is her return to the power. I think the first one has a little possibility. I think since Bangladesh has some kind of extradition treaty with India, so of course, the verdict is always there. And if she comes to Bangladesh, she has to face the legal consequences. So with that, eventually she can come. The second one, her ascension to politics is almost impossible because she has created a huge amount of criminal baggage. And I think with this baggage, I think it's almost impossible for her to return to politics. And she's not very old. I don't think she has that kind of, power, physical sort of strength to do that.
Energy to do
that, yes. And then the final one is I think it's almost impossible.
Right. Okay, so following the collapse of the Hossain government, what was the political future of the Awami League?
Okay.
And can the party survive this crisis, undergo a structural purge, and participate in future elections, or is this political era effectively over?
I think Awami League is now facing an existential threat. Okay. My assessment is that with the legacy of Sheikh Hasina, I think this Awami League cannot function in Bangladesh. I think that era is totally over. Of course, Awami League has a very deep historical kind of legacy with 1952 as well as 71. And so to some extent, they are kind of relevant to to Bangladesh's identity and the political landscape. But I think, but so far I know that none of the party leaders they haven't said even a single or minimum sorry to what they have done. They have done right, killing hundreds and thousands of people, injuring so many. I mean, all these horrific kind of atrocities that they have done.
Killing kids even.
Yeah,
very
kids
innocent
even,
faces.
Exactly. Yes. And also the plundering the resources from the country, $234 billion from this poor nation. It's not a joke, So with this baggage, how come, this basically the Nazi kind of party, right? The Nazi party cannot function in Germany, for example. I think we can see a parallel between Nazi and Awami League here. But yes, I think in the last election, and of course there are some supporters of Awami League. They didn't take part in the atrocities. But in the last election, they actually participated. You see, one of the amazing things in the last election, that in the Awami strongholds, most of the BNP, candidates they eventually win. So that means they got the vote from the Awami supporters. So even though their party is not there, but they exercise their political kind of right to vote for a candidate, right? So I think with the leadership of Sheikh Hasina, I think there is no future at all for Awami League. But an Awami League might be, going back to some kind of, Muslim League sort of political party, with no, role in the country. But if they have a very sort of, visionary leadership and they can, distance itself absolutely from Sheikh Hasina and her baggage, I think there is a little, perhaps hope or, some kind of light at the end of the tunnel for them.
Right.
Otherwise, my point here is that with Sheikh Hasina's role and leadership, there is no future of Awami League in Bangladesh.
Jamaat-e-Islami has sought to rebrand and expand its footprint in this new political landscape. Now, how do you evaluate their post-revolution performance?
I think, I think that I also made a kind of very rigorous investigation of what Jamaat-e-Islam is doing. Even before the July Revolution, I wrote a book, The Jamaat Question in Bangladesh, and that was published by Routledge. This is one of the, I think this is the only book written on the question of Jamaat in Bangladesh in the last, 85 years or so. So anyway, so Jamaat, I think, what I understood is that Jamaat is perhaps the only country that has the organizational capacity, and it has mobilized its younger generation, and it is also nurturing the whole expectation of the July Revolution. So, of course, it has ideological commitment, but recently I can see a lot of shift happening within Jamaat, basically to make it kind of broader, sort of pluralistic, political party in the nation, basically to capture the attention of different quarters of the nation. But still, there are certain issues that Jamaat needs to deal with. For example, the 71 baggage, and then the issue of women and minority issues and so on. I think that continuously people are talking about them. But I think Jamaat will manage to solve all these issues, and I think that if you think of the expectation of the July, revolution, I think Jamaat might be one of the leading political parties that are trying to work for it.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, New Delhi was widely seen as a primary external patron of the Hossain regime. Now, how has the July Revolution permanently altered Dhaka-New Delhi relations? And how is India adapting to this new geopolitical reality?
Very good question. I think it also changed the entire landscape of the the relationship between Bangladesh and India. Traditionally, in the last 17 years or so during the Hasina regime, we can see that the relationship was between India with one party or one person, right? And Sheikh Hasina,
it was like one person relationship.
One person
control
relationship,
one,
right?
Control one country.
Exactly. And Sheikh Hasina had some kind of subservient, sort of foreign policy. In the foreign policy, people always think of how much, a country is gaining from other nation. In case of Bangladesh, Hasina said that, how much Bangladesh actually offered to India, right? Something she was boasting that, India will never forget the kind of things that we have done for India, right? So that sort of thing. And another minister, that, he branded the whole relationship as husband and wife. It's a very, very derogatory kind of relationship between, India and Bangladesh. But that kind of situation is totally gone. I think July Revolution totally transformed this relationship. Now I think the younger generations, the Gen Zs, the participants of the July, revolution, they are actually demanding some kind of, win-win sort of situation in which, both have equal sort of, relationship, equal sort of say, on different kinds of issues. India actually created some kind of perpetual gratefulness sort of narrative that they have helped us. They actually helped us to get the independence in 1971. So we have to remain grateful to them and pay the tribute to them
like that.
Forever. So that kind of narrative is now at stake. So now I think there is the new kind of relationship is that now the India has to deal with not just one party, but with the whole government, with the people to people, government to government kind of relationship is something that is under discussion. And also we see there are a lot of issues. July Revolution actually transformed the political landscape, but it cannot change the neighborhood, right?
Right.
So India will remain our neighbor. And I think there is a need to have a very profound, good relationship within India. So there is a need to have win-win situation, win-win sort of partnership. And also, India should be, our partner in progress and not adversary in conflict. So anti-Indian kind of, foreign policy and absolutely pro-Indian foreign policy, both are kind of, detrimental to our national interest. So we have a lot of issues like water sharing. We have the issues with trade. For example, we are, buying about $12 billion of goods from India, and they are buying only $2 billion. That's a huge kind of disparity in that. We have border killing, right, going on still today. And also there are many other, bilateral issues, that are affecting the relationship between India and Bangladesh. I think these are some of the areas where both Bangladesh and India need to be a kind of common, partner to solve all these problems. And India has its own interest. Bangladesh also has its own interest. Yeah.
Right. Well, now a revolution is often followed by a demand for blood and justice.
Yeah.
Normally. So, what are the practical challenges of establishing tribunals to hold the previous regime accountable for the violence of July without it, devolving into victor's justice?
Right. I think that is exactly what happened in the last tribunal during the time of Hasina regime, right? I think the tribunal was very quick, and it was absolutely saying some kind of, the kangaroo court, right? But I think after the revolution, I think the tribunal actually has, and it is amazing to see that the tribunal that was launched by Sheikh Hasina, the same tribunal is now trying Sheikh Hasina for her crime for the humanity, right?
Yes.
Do you see how the history repeats itself, right? But what I heard is that after the July Revolution, I think the tribunal actually embraced a lot of changes,
right,
to make sure that it can go up to the international standard. So I think the justice needs to be seen very, very clearly. There should not be any compromise on that. We understand that Sheikh Hasina actually have done a huge amount of crime against humanity, and that is absolutely proven. Proven by, for example, United Nations, their inquiry and everything. All the evidences are there, but it has to go through a very, very rigorous and very transparent and very due process to make sure that nobody can raise any kind of question about the procedure. I think that is very important. I think what the tribunal can do, perhaps it can bring some, observer even from the, foreign nations, right, to make sure that the tribunal, the due procedures are absolutely transparent. And also some of the hearing was online. I mean, to make sure that the people can see, that what is going on, rather than having everything in the closed door. I think the tribunal has some effort, and more efforts are needed to make sure that nobody can question about it. For example, in case of the inquiry about the killing of the students, UN was involved and nobody can ask question. By the way, Sheikh Hasina actually filed a kind of petition against UN, disputing with this figure.
Right.
And now, what happened? Even, previously they had all of their records were kind of confidential. Now they open everything public. Okay. So now people can see it.
What's going on?
Yeah, what went on at that time.
Right. The state attempted to crush the uprising through sheer digital force like internet blackouts and surveillance. How did the youth circumvent this, and what does this teach us about the limits of digital authoritarianism?
Okay, actually, the digital authoritarianism, meaning that, making blackout, of the internet, or controlling the social media and so on. I think the last regime did everything possible, but it didn't work.
Yes.
It didn't work because, as I mentioned, that this Gen Z is very, very creative. When something was
I think last regime tried to control almost, 360-degree angles possible. Exactly.
And they're very creative, They immediately they managed to have alternative system, right? With Bluetooth and, foreign SIMs and all kinds of things.
Right.
Even just going, and passing the disk to other people. Mm-hmm. And also I think the diaspora also helped a lot,
Right.
So some of the things that they could not, show in this country, we can see it has been already shown by other people, in other countries. So this is the creativity is very good. I think they managed to have alternative sort of avenues to continue their campaign, number one. Secondly, I think it is also detrimental for the regime to have this, digital authoritarianism, because when you stop internet, for example, right, you are also stopping business, stopping the flow of money through remittances and so on.
Schools, colleges, everything.
Exactly. So it is also actually weakening the power of the regime at the same time.
You are trying to stop even taking oxygen.
Exactly.
Sounds like that.
Yes. You're basically digging your own grave, right? So I think it doesn't work at all. So in this way, I think this is a very good lesson, even for the current and the upcoming government, that digital authoritarianism will not work at all. Because this Gen Z is so smart, they have alternative avenues, number one. Secondly, when you control this kind of things, during the time of July Revolution, we found that the time it was controlled, at that time, it becomes even more, it created more grievances among the people.
Right.
And the movement becomes even more forceful at that time. So it's counterproductive, right?
Yes.
In that sense. So that's why I think digital authoritarianism doesn't work at all.
Okay. History shows that revolutions are often followed by counter-revolutionary pushback from the old guard or the deep state. Now, what do you see the greatest threat of a counter-revolution emerging in Bangladesh today?
I think we can say during the time of the interim government, I think there are more than 100 counter-revolution movement, but they managed to tackle all of them. I think the first one is supposed to come from the elite, who have the vested interest in preserving the old structure.
Right.
Yeah, so this is number one. And even today, I think this is one of the great challenges, I'm sure, that the BNP government is facing, because even though the political leaders and their MPs, they left the country, but the structure, the bureaucracy actually remains.
Same.
Yeah, that remains the same. So the government has to deal with them.
Right.
So they will always try to make sure that the counter-revolution, their interest is being, kind of preserved within the old system rather than new system. This is number one. Secondly, we also see that sometimes the foreign forces can also
Right.
make a kind of role to make sure that the old structure is remaining and so on. So I think that's why the current government needs to be really, really vigilant to make sure that the counter-revolution is not destroying the spirit of July Revolution.
Right. Well, over the last decade, institutions like the judiciary, police, and civil service were deeply politicized. Now, is it practically possible to depoliticize these state apparatuses?
I think 100% total depoliticization is not possible or realistic, because they have to operate within the political sort of environment. Okay, but I think what is needed is kind of partisanization, right? I think there is a need to inculcate some kind of fairness, which is basically the main slogan of the July Revolution. And that is the meritocracy, okay?
Yes.
So rather than employing everybody through, the political affiliation and so on, I think there is a need to have, some kind of meritocracy to make sure that the institutions are functioning very well,
Yes.
and they are not just 100% politicized.
So, as an academic documenting history as it unfolds live in the streets, and how did you balance the necessity for scholarly objectivity with the raw, traumatic, and highly emotional human realities of the July Revolution?
That is a very good question. I think maintaining objectivity doesn't mean that we have to be emotionally empty, right? Because if we are becoming emotionally empty, then we are not. It is to my understanding, it is also, what you should say. I think it is some kind of ethically inappropriate, right? Because there are a lot of trauma, suffering, agony, and many other kinds of psychological and social sort of disposition. I think as a researcher, we need to also capture those kind of moments to document very well. But what I did, in my research, for example, I had a very, very rigorous kind of methodology, with interviews, focus group discussion. I have, for example, analyzed more than 100 different talk shows regarding July Revolution, different kinds of documentaries, participant observation, and all kinds of things. So I had to make sure that, the data that I, collected are kind of, are analyzed in a very, very objective manner to make sure that, I have the correct one. And also later on, after writing, I also get it reviewed by some of the experts to make sure that objectivity is kind of maintained. So yes, I think there is a need to capture all these emotional sort of dynamics. We cannot just totally ignore. I think one of the things, since I am also part of Bangladeshi culture, and I can also become some kind of my own emotion and so on. Yes. I understand that one. But while I am doing my research, since I understand my own, disposition, this is something we call intersubjectivity.
Yes.
So since I'm aware of all these things, I think that awareness is very important to make sure that I'm objective in my own investigation.
All right. Thank you. Now we're going to conclude our session today by asking the last question, and that is, while historical fascism and Nazism were unique to mid-20th century Europe, philosophers like Hannah Arendt and Umberto Eco have outlined the universal characteristics of totalitarianism. Now, such as the cult of tradition, the creation of an omnipresent enemy, and the demand for absolute loyalty. Looking at the final years of the Hossain regime, which specific mechanism of state control mirrored this classical fascist or totalitarian philosophies, and how did the youth immunize themselves against that state propaganda?
Okay, very good question. What I understand is that, we have the history of fascism in Europe with Hitler, Mussolini, and so on. I think in case of Sheikh Hasina actually have all these different characteristics. She has all these basic characteristics. The cult politics, for example, unquestionable allegiance, all
Yes.
kinds of things are very, very, intact in Sheikh Hasina's fascism. But I think Sheikh Hasina was 1 degree ahead.
Yes.
In the sense that I don't call her just fascist, I call her kleptocratic fascism. Fascism and kleptocracy. In case of, for example, Hitler, right? He was a very, very, strong nationalist.
Yes.
I mean, even though he was fascist, but he was always thinking about his own nation, right? I mean, he can fight with other people, but, he will make sure that his nation is kind of flourishing. But in case of Sheikh Hasina, this is totally different, She was fascist, but at the cost of her own country.
She needed
right?
just power.
She totally, she just, she had this power, and she subjugated herself to India, and also she plundered the whole nation.
And I got some of her interview where she tried to say that I need absolute power, not power. It has to be absolute power.
Yeah. So in that sense, I think we have European experience, which is basically the highest level of fascism. But I think in case of Sheikh Hasina, it is even 1 degree ahead.
All right. Well,
in case of the second part of the question, I think the Gen Z, I think it's amazing. As I mentioned that in the last 3,000 years of Bengal history, she is basically the most powerful and also the most fascist, in our written history. But the Gen Zs, they have, I think, all these different kinds of creativity, mobilization capacity, and also
leadership capacity. I think
leadership
was amazing.
capacity also. Yes, I think there are a bunch of people. I should say that, I mean, even though there are some people ahead of the, structure, but we also see there are people.
I think Sheikh Hasina structured her whole government in a way that nobody can, I think, take her power off from any section of, I think, of her structure.
Exactly.
But Gen Z, I think, found out, I think, what can I say, intersected all the injustice that they found. And they just cut the injustices and some of the issues. They tried it.
I think I should, because I did my research, I should say that, for example, even there are some leaders who are in the forefront, but there are some strategies. I think that was largely done by Civic, Bangladesh Islamic Civic, yes. So they understand the whole dynamics, and that's why they didn't, become the, forefront leaders, right? And it is very difficult for the regime to track down from where all these strategies are coming, right? It's a very amazing kind of, innovation that the Gen Zs actually did
I
at
think
the time.
it's something. So sometimes I feel that if you want to do something against such government, then you have to have a very clear sense of total politics.
Right.
Other than that, I think, so we could say that Gen Z, I think they are definitely politically conscious and aware throughout the time.
And perhaps that there was a time, perhaps in 20th July or something, that even the the front leaders, they thought that I think the revolution is over.
Right.
I mean, the fight is basically over. And at that time, the private universities plus this the main driving force, I think, based in Dhaka University,
they contributed a lot.
Sadiq Kayam and his team.
Yeah.
I think they are the one who actually moved, led the movement to the final destination, which is the fall of the regime.
Yeah, they made it real.
Yeah,
finally.
Exactly.
I think there was a time when it was supposed to be stopped, but I think they continued it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you. For having a discussion about this. We are very, very grateful to have you. If you have any comments to our audiences about ideology, power, and the post-July state, and any other issues, you can share it with our audience.
Okay, very good. First of all, I'm very happy to be here, sharing my experience. Of course, Genji has this special sort of power to topple a powerful government, but at the same time, I think they need to train themselves how a country is actually functioning, how to do negotiation. Because, okay, we have the revolution, which is kind of successful, but the next stage is state,
structuring
the whole state, yes, constructing the state building basically,
and leading,
and
operating.
And for that, I think Genji actually needs a lot of experience, right? I'm sure that Genji will gain that one, and eventually we have a kind of bright future ahead.
If you don't mind, do you have any suggestion for Genji, how they can get all this, system or information about leading and operating the country?
I think they need to study a lot. I think rather than just sticking to social media, I think at the same time they need to have a very, serious sort of reading, and also having some kind of experience participating in some kind of, state apparatus, foreign relationship and so on. I think those who have some kind of political ambition, especially, for example, NCP and so on, I think they need to have some kind of very broad-based sort of training to run the whole country. Because in the 21st century, it is running a state is a huge kind of thing, right? You need to understand the neoliberal neoliberal realities in the whole world, the foreign relationship, because we have different kinds of realities, because we are surrounded by India. The Indian question is also very significant. And also, whatever revolution you have, if you cannot bring the real economic kind of change to the local people, I think your revolution will not sustain for a longer period of time. So I think revolution can happen in just few days, but sustaining it is very, very difficult.
Right.
Like, gaining independence is easy, but retaining or preserving independence is very, very difficult.
Yes.
So I think that is one of the things that they need to think of. I think their real role actually starts from now. Right.
Who they are and what they have to do exactly right now.
If they think that, okay, our things are done, we have accomplished. No, this is not the thing. For example, I have a PhD student, and after completing the PhD, I said that this is just the beginning. This is not the end of the journey.
Right.
Because now you will be writing the top tier journals and so on, to become kind of established scholar in the whole world. And now it is the time for Genji to actually, go to that level.
We have known that you have written a book about July. So could you please say something about this book and to our audience? We would be very happy to get this book, and how can you get it, and what's it all about in one last sentence?
Very good. Okay, the title of the book is The Anatomy of Revolt, the July Revolution and the Struggle for Democracy in Bangladesh. And this book is going to be published by Oxford University Press.
Very good.
And with this publication, I'm sure that this is perhaps the most credible book ever written on the question of July Revolution.
Yeah.
Because you understand, Oxford University is a very, very elite kind of publication. And I'm sure that with this publication, July Revolution will be part of the global history.
Yes.
This book will be found almost everywhere in the world, top universities in the world. And, already I have been invited to give talk, for example, in Germany and also other countries about the book.
Yes.
So we can see the growing interest about the book. The book is now in production, and it will be out in November. But people can have early, pre-order from now on.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a good journey throughout the world with July.
Thank you.
We pray for you, and we hope that you will bring some more good experiences from different parts of the world about this.
Obviously, and this is my goal basically. I think GNG, they have created this revolution. With this book, I want to create some kind of intellectual revolution around the world. Inshallah.
Thank you for giving us some time about this, and we are very happy to have you. And I think if you have time, we'll invite you again, inshallah, and we'll be very happy again if you give us time. Thank you for joining.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you, dear audience. Today we have talked about ideology, power, and the post-July state, and you know that we have our guest, a special guest with us, Dr. Saidul Islam, who is going to share this message globally. And the message is very clear: the demand of July Revolution, the ultimate goal of July Revolution. He's trying to spread this message throughout the world. We pray for him to spread out this message as much as possible. At the same time, it's our responsibility as well to construct and rebuild the country, because movement is something that may happen within very short time, that we have understood throughout the discussion. But the most important thing is to build the nation, to structure, to construct the nation. So this is a time when GNG has to play a vital role. and we pray for them as well. Thank you for joining and watching this episode. We're very grateful to be with us throughout the journey. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.